My son left me with nothing after taking my house, but I triumphed, winning a $1.2 million settlement that changed everything. I never thought the hands I once kissed with so much love would be the same ones to take it all away. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd share. And if you, for just a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I only ask that you leave a like and subscribe. You'll be helping me continue to unburden myself. My name is Barbara Garcia. I'm 61 years old, and I've lived my whole life in San Antonio, in the same house where I raised my son, Alex, with my own two hands, calloused from years of sewing. That adobe house with its red-tiled roof, its small patio full of the bougainvillea I planted when he was just a baby, had been my sanctuary, my pride, my entire world for over 30 years. Every morning, I'd wake up at 5, when the air still held the cool of the night and the bells of the San Fernando Cathedral began to toll in the distance. I'd put the coffee on the gas stove, the one his father and I bought secondhand when we were newlyweds, and as the aroma filled the kitchen, I'd say a silent prayer that the day would be a good one for us all. My routine was simple but tiring. I'd have toast with butter, always the cheapest brand at the store, and black coffee, very black, because sugar had become a luxury I couldn't afford since my Social Security check seemed to shrink every year, like some cruel government joke. Then I'd sit down at my old Singer machine, the one I inherited from my mother that still ran like new, to work on the orders my neighbors brought me. Hemming pants, altering dresses, mending work shirts. My fingers moved mechanically over the fabric, guiding each stitch with the precision that only 40 years of experience can give. But while my hands worked, my mind always drifted to Alex, my only son, my pride, the man for whom I had sacrificed everything so he could get a degree in business administration, so he wouldn't have to live with the limitations I had known my whole life. When he was 12, his father died in a senseless work accident. A poorly secured beam at a construction site crushed his chest like it was paper. In that moment, I decided Alex would never know poverty. I worked double shifts. I sold my gold earrings, the only ones I had, the ones my mother gave me for my wedding. I cooked for others, washed their clothes, cleaned the houses of wealthy people who treated me like I was invisible. But it was worth it. Alex graduated from college. He got a job at a big firm. He married Sophia, a woman from a comfortable middle-class family who never looked at me with much warmth, but I accepted her because he loved her. They had 2 children, Camilla and Leo, my darling grandchildren who filled my house with laughter on Sundays when they came to visit. On that October morning when everything changed forever, I was sewing a Sweet 16 dress for Carmen's daughter, a pale pink gown with delicate lace that reminded me of the one I had dreamed of at her age but could never afford. The sun streamed through my living room window, illuminating the dust motes floating in the air like tiny stars, when I heard the engine of Alex's car pulling up out front. My heart sped up, as it always did when he arrived. Even though he was 35, to me, he was still my little boy. I quickly put my sewing aside, smoothed the gray hair that insisted on escaping my bun, and hurried to open the door. But something was different. Alex was with Sophia, which was odd because she rarely set foot in my house. She claimed she was allergic to the dust, even though I religiously cleaned every corner, every day. They carried a black leather folder and wore serious expressions that tied a knot in my stomach. "Hi, honey," I said, trying to hug him as I always did, but he pulled away gently, almost impatiently. "Mom, we need to talk to you. Can we sit down?" His voice was different, formal, like when he spoke to clients at his firm, not like he spoke to me, his mother, the woman who had stayed up all night with him when he had a fever as a child. We sat in my small living room, them on the sofa I'd reupholstered 3 times because I couldn't afford a new one, and me in my favorite wicker chair, the one that creaked whenever I moved. Sophia glanced around with that look I knew so well, the one she got when something wasn't quite good enough for her. "Mom," Alex began, opening the folder and taking out some official-looking papers. "Sophia and I have been thinking. You're 61 now, living alone in this big house, and frankly, we're worried about your safety." A chill ran down my spine. "My safety?" "Yeah, Mom. Look at these stairs," he said, pointing to the steps leading to my bedroom. "They're worn down. What if you fall one night? What if someone tries to break in and you can't defend yourself? This neighborhood isn't as safe as it used to be. Sophia nodded with that fake smile she had perfected over the years. Barbara, we just want what's best for you. We have a spare room in our house. It would be so much better if you lived with us, don't you think? I stared at them, feeling the world start to wobble beneath my feet. But this is my house, I whispered. I lived here with your father. You were born here. All my memories are here. Mom, memories are in your heart, not in the walls, Alex said with the forced patience adults use on stubborn children. Besides, keeping this house costs money you don't have. The property taxes, the utilities, the repairs. Your Social Security check barely covers your food. It was true. My check was a pittance. But this house was mine. It was the only thing I had in the world. Look, he continued, pointing at the papers. We just need you to sign this. It's an authorization so we can help you with the house paperwork. It's nothing complicated. We're just trying to protect you. I took the papers with trembling hands. The letters seemed to dance before my eyes. And though I tried to read, I couldn't make sense of half the technical terms. What does it say exactly? Just that you authorize us to handle matters related to the property, Sophia explained in that sweet, venomous voice she'd learned to use with me. For your own good, Barbara. I looked at my son, searching his eyes for that spark of unconditional love I had always seen there. But what I found was impatience, a sense of urgency, as if my indecision was an annoying obstacle to be quickly overcome. With my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst, I took the pen Sophia offered me. And I signed. I signed because he was my son. I signed because I trusted him. I signed because a mother's love can sometimes blind you and make you vulnerable. I signed, not knowing I had just handed over not only my house, but my dignity, my independence, and my future with a single line of blue ink. That night, after they left with the papers under their arm and vague promises to talk soon about the details, I was left alone in my living room, staring at the walls that had witnessed my entire life. I didn't know it would be one of the last nights I would sleep in my own bed. I didn't know that my son, my only son, had just begun to destroy everything I had built with my own hands. I didn't know that a mother's unconditional love could be used as a weapon against her. But I was about to find out. 3 days after I signed those papers, Alex returned. This time he was alone, without Sophia, wearing a smile that didn't reach his eyes and an attitude that felt strangely familiar. It was the same look he'd get as a child when he'd broken something and was trying to hide it. Mom, we need the keys to the house. Just for a few days. We're going to have an inspection done to see what repairs it needs before you move in with us. My hands instinctively clutched the keychain I always carried, the one with the small metal heart Alex had given me for my 50th birthday. The keys felt heavier than usual, as if each one was made of lead instead of steel. Can I be here during the inspection? It's not necessary, Mom. They'll be specialists. You don't understand that stuff. Besides, you have enough to do packing your personal things. Packing? No one had told me I had to start packing. I thought we'd have weeks, maybe months to plan all this. But Alex, I haven't decided what to do with the plants, with your father's furniture, with… Mom. His voice hardened for the first time in years. Don't make this complicated. Just give me the keys. And I gave them to him, like I always had, like I always would for him. That night, alone in my house that suddenly felt bigger and emptier than ever, I started to remember. The memories came like an avalanche I couldn't stop, each one more painful than the last, because now I was seeing them through different eyes. I remembered when Alex was 14 and wanted a new bike, one of those expensive mountain bikes the rich kids at his school had. I was cleaning the Miller family's house 3 times a week back then. Mrs. Miller paid me $800 a month to clean her 3-story house, wash her expensive clothes, and tend to her exotic plants. Mom, all my friends have new bikes. Mine is so old, he'd told me that day, with those puppy dog eyes that always worked on me. I knew the bike cost $300. $300 I didn't have, but I also knew my son couldn't be less than the others. I couldn't let him feel poor, inferior, left out. So I took on extra work. I started cleaning the Miller's neighbor's house on weekends. I stopped buying meat, and we ate nothing but beans, rice, and eggs for 2 months. I sold my wedding ring, the only valuable memento I had left of his father, to a pawn shop that gave me next to nothing for it. When I gave him the bike, Alex shouted with joy and hugged me so tight I thought my ribs would break. "You're the best mom in the world," he had said. That sentence had been worth every sacrifice, or so I thought at the time. I also remembered when he graduated from college. I had worked double shifts for 5 years to pay for his tuition. While my coworkers went home to rest after 8 hours of sewing, I would stay until 10 at night finishing extra orders. My eyes grew weak from straining them under the artificial light, and my hands developed premature arthritis from the repetitive motion. On his graduation day, I was so proud that I arrived 2 hours early to get a seat in the front row. I wore my only nice dress, a navy blue one I'd bought secondhand for the occasion, and shoes that hurt my feet but were the only dressy pair I owned. When they called his name and he walked across the stage to get his diploma, I cried. I cried with happiness, pride, and satisfaction. All those years of sacrifice had been worth it. My son was a professional. My son was going to have a better future than mine. After the ceremony, he came over with Sophia, his girlfriend at the time, a pretty girl in expensive clothes with refined manners that made me feel small and insignificant. "Mom, I want you to meet Sophia's parents." The Hamiltons were wealthy people. You could see it in everything. Their clothes, the way they spoke, the way they looked me up and down, evaluating my cheap dress and worn-out shoes. "Mrs. Hamilton greeted me with the cold politeness that well-mannered people use when forced to interact with someone they consider beneath them. During the celebration dinner at an expensive restaurant downtown, I sat in silence while everyone discussed topics I didn't understand. Investments, business deals, trips abroad. Alex seemed to be in his element, laughing and chatting as if he'd been born into that world. Not once did he mention how his education had been paid for. Not once did he introduce me as the woman who had worked herself to exhaustion so he could be there. To everyone at that table, I was simply Alex's mom, an unimportant old woman. That night, when we got home, he gave me a quick hug and said, "Thanks for everything, Mom. I promise one day I'll pay you back for everything you've done for me." I clung to that promise for years. I also remembered when Camilla, my first grandchild, was born. Alex called me from the hospital crying, "Mom, she's perfect. She's beautiful. But Sophia is really weak from the delivery and she's going to need help. Could you come stay with us for a few weeks?" Of course I could. I left my sewing, my clients, my income, and moved temporarily into their new house, the one they'd bought in a gated community where I didn't fit in at all. For 6 weeks, I got up every night when Camilla cried so Sophia could rest. I cooked, cleaned, did laundry, ironed. I cared for my granddaughter as if she were my own daughter while Alex worked and Sophia recovered. When I finally returned home, I had lost 3 clients who had gotten tired of waiting for their orders. My savings were gone because I hadn't been able to work during those weeks. But I didn't care. I had helped my family when they needed me. Alex thanked me with a cheap box of chocolates and the promise that someday he would make it up to me. The same thing happened when Leah was born 2 years later, and when Alex lost his first job and needed money to get by until he found another one, and when they wanted to buy a new car but were short on the down payment, and when Sophia decided to get her master's degree and they needed help with the expenses. Every time they needed me, I was there. Every time they were short on money, I found a way to get it, even if it meant selling something, working more hours, or eating less. Every time they needed me to watch the kids, I canceled my plans and made myself available. And every time, Alex promised me that someday he would make it up to me, that someday he would pay me back, that someday he would give me the peaceful life I deserved. I lived for those some days. Now, sitting in my living room as the evening shadows stretched across my house like cold fingers, I started to wonder if someday had ever arrived for Alex. If he had ever, for a moment, thought about keeping any of those promises. Or if I had just been his personal bank, his free nanny, his unconditional safety net to be used when convenient and forgotten when not. Doubt settled in my chest like a heavy stone. For the first time in my life as a mother, I began to question whether my unconditional love had been returned or simply taken for granted. I couldn't sleep that night. Not because of the financial worries that usually kept me awake, but because of a question that played over and over in my head like a broken record. When did I stop being Alex's mother and become his victim? The answer came the next day, when I heard the roar of a moving truck parking in front of my house, and realized that the few days my son had mentioned had been just another lie. My time had run out without any warning, and my son had decided my future without consulting me. The roar of the moving truck woke me at 6 in the morning. From my window, I saw 3 men unloading equipment and heading for my front door. My heart started pounding so fast I thought I was going to have a heart attack right there, in my nightgown and slippers. I rushed to open the door before they could knock, desperately hoping it was a mistake, that they had the wrong address. "Morning, ma'am. We're here for the furniture at the Garcia House, 247 Morales Street." It was my address. There was no mistake. But I didn't authorize any move. There must be a misunderstanding. The oldest man, with a gray mustache and blue overalls, showed me a signed work order. There was Alex's signature, clear and decisive, authorizing the removal of all household goods for relocation. "Where is my son? He should be here." "I don't know, ma'am. We just follow orders. Can we come in?" I had no choice but to step aside as these strangers invaded my home like it was conquered territory. They started with the living room. My brown velvet armchair, the one where I had nursed Alex and watched my grandchildren play during family Sundays, was wrapped in plastic like a corpse. The little coffee table that had belonged to my mother, where I had placed fresh flowers every week for 30 years, disappeared into the calloused hands of men who didn't know its history. "Wait, please," I begged them. "That table. Can you leave it? It's the only thing I have left from my mom." "Sorry, ma'am, but the order says all goods. We can't make exceptions." Every piece of furniture they carried out took a piece of my soul with it. The china cabinet where I kept the porcelain dishes that had been a wedding gift from my in-laws. The bookcase holding the few novels I had managed to buy over the years, and the family photos in cheap frames filled with love. By the time they reached my bedroom, I was sobbing uncontrollably. Watching them dismantle my bed, the one I had shared with Alex's father for 15 years, where I had watched over my sick son so many nights, where I had dreamed of a better future for my family, was like watching my own funeral. "Ma'am, you need to get your clothes and personal items. Everything else is going." With trembling hands, I started stuffing my clothes into plastic bags. 30 years of a domestic life reduced to 4 trash bags. My dresses, my shoes, my underwear, all jumbled together without order or dignity, as if I were a homeless person being evicted. I tried to call Alex. The phone rang and rang until it went to voicemail. "Alex, it's your mom. Please call me. They're taking all my furniture and I don't understand what's happening. Please, son, explain this to me." I hung up and dialed again. Voicemail. "Honey, please, I'm so confused. The men say you authorized this. Please call me." On the 3rd try, his phone was off. Carmen, my lifelong neighbor, peeked out her window when she saw the commotion. This woman who had been my confidant for so many years, who had shared coffee with me every afternoon for a decade, who knew all my secrets and my joys. "What's going on, Barbara?" "I don't know, Carmen. Alex says it's for my own good, that I'm going to live with them, but I couldn't finish the sentence because just then, they carried out my Singer sewing machine, my livelihood, my sustenance, my faithful companion of 40 years. "Not that one!" I screamed, running toward the movers. "Please, that machine is my job. Without it, I can't earn any money." "We understand, ma'am, but the order clearly states all household goods. We can't make exceptions." I stood on the sidewalk, watching my sewing machine disappear into the truck like any other worthless object. 40 years of honest work, of early mornings sewing so Alex could go to college, of sleepless nights finishing orders to pay his expenses, and now it was gone as if it had never meant anything. Carmen put her arm around my shoulders. "Come on, let's go to my place. You shouldn't watch this." But I couldn't move. It was as if my feet had grown roots into the pavement. I needed to witness my own destruction. I needed to see just how far my son's betrayal went. When they brought out the family photos, when I saw the portraits of Alex's birthdays, his graduations, my grandchildren, pass before my eyes, something inside my chest shattered. It wasn't a sharp pain, but something dull and deep, like when a support beam breaks and the whole structure begins to slowly collapse. At 2 in the afternoon, the truck drove away, carrying my entire life with it. My house was left empty, desolate, like an eggshell after the chick has hatched and flown away. Only the faded marks on the floor where the furniture had stood for years remained, like ghosts of a life that no longer existed. Alex arrived at 4, when there was nothing left to see but my desolation. "Hi, Mom. How are you feeling?" How was I feeling? I felt like my skin had been peeled off in strips and I'd been left raw under the sun. "Why didn't you tell me they were coming today?" "I told you they were doing an inspection. We just took the opportunity to get a head start on the move. It's better this way, like ripping off a Band-Aid." Ripping out my entire life was like ripping off a Band-Aid to him. "And my things? Where is my furniture?" "In a storage unit, safe and sound. Later, we'll see what we can fit in our house and what's best to sell." Sell? He was going to sell the furniture that had witnessed my entire life? "Alex, that coffee table was my mother's. And my sewing machine. I need my machine to work." "Mom, you're not going to have to work anymore. You're going to live with us. We'll support you." "Support me." As if I were a pet. As if I were a burden. "But I want to work. I like to sew. It's what I know how to do." "Mom, you're 61. It's time for you to rest." Rest? He said it like it was a gift, but to me it sounded like a death sentence. What was I going to do with my days without my work? How would I feel useful, productive, alive? "And when do I move in with you?" "Well, Sophia needs a few weeks to get your room ready. In the meantime, you can stay with Carmen, right? I'm sure she won't mind." A few weeks? After taking all my furniture, he was going to leave me homeless for weeks? "Alex, this is my house. Why can't I stay here while Sophia gets the room ready?" "Because it's not safe anymore, Mom. The house is empty. Anyone could break in." I stared at him, trying to find any trace of the boy he had been, of the young man who had hugged me on his graduation day, of the man who had called me crying when his children were born. But what I saw was a stranger who spoke with my son's voice, but looked at me as if I were a problem to be solved, not the woman who had sacrificed her entire life for him. "How long will you need?" "Not long. 3 weeks. A month at most. A month sleeping on Carmen's couch. A month without my house, without my things, without my routine, without my identity. And what if I don't want to go with you? What if I want to stay in my house?" For the first time in the entire conversation, Alex looked me directly in the eye, and what I saw there chilled me to the bone. "Mom, you already signed the papers. The decision's been made." In that moment, I understood. The papers I had signed 3 days earlier hadn't been a temporary authorization. They had been my sentence of exile. And my son, my only son, had been my executioner. That night, I slept on Carmen's couch, covered with a quilt that smelled of someone else's fabric softener, listening to the tick-tock of a clock that wasn't mine in a house that wasn't mine, wondering how I had become a refugee in my own neighborhood. At 61 years old, I was homeless, and it was all because I trusted my son's word. The weeks at Carmen's house turned into a silent hell, not because she was unkind. On the contrary, she treated me with a kindness that made me weep with gratitude. But every night, lying on her worn-out sofa, I would count the hours until dawn, waiting for Alex to call and tell me my room was ready. The call never came. Instead, other things came. Things that broke my soul into pieces so small I didn't know if I could ever put them back together. The first blow came 3 weeks after the move, on a Tuesday that started like any other. Carmen had gone to the market, and I was alone in her house, trying to keep my hands busy by knitting a sweater for Leo with the one skein of yarn I had managed to save from my house. My fingers moved mechanically, but my mind wandered to dark places, asking questions I didn't want to ask. The doorbell rang, and I thought Carmen had forgotten her keys again. But when I opened it, I saw a young man in a white shirt and tie, carrying a thick folder that was a painful reminder of the day I signed my own sentence. "Mrs. Barbara Garcia?" "Yes, that's me. My name is Luis Morales, from the Hernandez and Associates law firm. I need to speak with you about a property at 247 Morales Street." "My house." He was talking about my house. What about my house? The young man looked around uncomfortably before answering. Ma'am, I regret to inform you that the property was put on the market a week ago. I'm here to officially notify you that you have 30 days to vacate the premises, as the new owner will take possession next month. The words reached my ears as if from the bottom of a well. On the market? New owner? There must be a mistake. That house is mine. I've lived there for over 30 years. The lawyer opened his folder and showed me official-looking documents, full of seals and signatures I didn't understand. According to public records, the property was legally transferred to Mr. Alex Garcia 3 weeks ago, via a deed of transfer signed by you. Mr. Garcia immediately listed it for sale and already has a buyer. The world started spinning around me like a top. I grabbed the door frame to keep from falling. How much did he sell it for? The sale closed at $850,000. $850,000. My house, my home, the place where I had raised my son, mourned my husband, dreamed of growing old surrounded by my grandchildren, was worth $850,000. And Alex had sold it without telling me. And where is that money? The lawyer looked at me with what might have been sympathy, if I had been paying attention to anything other than the deafening roar in my ears. Ma'am, I only handle the legal side of the transaction. The funds were dispersed directly to Mr. Garcia as the legal owner of the property. After the lawyer left, I stood in Carmen's doorway for I don't know how long. It could have been an hour. It could have been 5 minutes. Time had become liquid, slipping through my fingers. When Carmen returned from the market and found me there, frozen like a statue, I knew from her expression that something terrible was written on my face. What happened, Barbara? You're white as a sheet. I couldn't speak. The words were literally stuck in my throat like stones. I could only hand her the papers the lawyer had left. Carmen read them aloud, and every word that left her mouth was a hammer blow to my chest. Total transfer of rights, property deed transfer, authorized sale. When she finished reading, her eyes filled with tears. Oh, Barbara, what has your son done to you? I couldn't eat that night. My stomach had clenched into a tight fist. Carmen tried to get me to have some chicken broth, but even the smell of food made me nauseous. I tried calling Alex. His phone was off. I tried calling Sophia. She hung up as soon as she heard my voice. I tried calling the house where I was supposed to be living with them. No one answered. It was as if my family had vanished from the face of the earth after stealing everything I had. But the truth was much worse than that. The truth arrived 2 days later, when Carmen came back from the mall with a look on her face I had never seen before. She sat down across from me without even taking off her shoes, something she never did. Barbara, I need to tell you something, but I don't know how. My heart braced for another blow. By now, I thought nothing could hurt more than I already did. I was wrong. I saw Alex and Sophia at Nordstrom. They were buying expensive things. Lots of expensive things. Clothes, shoes, a giant television. She paused, as if the next words burned her mouth. Barbara, Sophia was wearing a pearl necklace that must have cost more than you and I make in a year. And Alex was wearing a gold watch that shined so brightly you could see it from across the store. Jewelry, designer clothes, electronics. With the money from my house, with the $850,000 that had been my life savings, my security, my future. Did they see you? Yes. Alex looked right at me. I called out his name, but he just turned his head and kept walking as if he didn't know me, as if he didn't know the woman who had been his mother's neighbor for 30 years, as if he didn't know the woman who had looked after him as a boy when I had to work double shifts, as if she were a stranger. And Camilla? And Leo? They weren't with them. My grandchildren. My 2 grandchildren who had been the light of my Sundays for so many years. Where were they while their parents spent their grandmother's stolen money? That night, alone on Carmen's sofa, I cried until I had no tears left. I cried for my house, sold without my knowledge. I cried for the $850,000 that had bought pearl necklaces and gold watches while I slept on a borrowed couch. I cried for my son, who had pretended not to know a neighbor rather than face the truth. But most of all, I cried for the woman I had been, the woman who had believed in unconditional love, the woman who thought a mother's sacrifices would always be remembered and valued. The woman who had signed a stack of papers because she blindly trusted her son's word. That woman had died the day Alex sold my house. And the woman being born in her place was someone I didn't know yet. But she had something new running through her veins. Something bitter. Something cold. Something that tasted like betrayal and whispered that maybe it was time to stop being a victim. The next day, after Carmen left for work, I sat staring at the phone for 2 hours before I dared to make the call I knew I had to make. I dialed information and asked for a directory of lawyers in San Antonio. It was time to find out if a betrayed mother had any legal rights. It was time to see if I could get back any of what they had stolen from me. It was time to stop crying and start fighting. Because if Alex thought he could just erase me from his life after stealing mine, he was in for the biggest surprise of his. His mother had been a submissive woman for 61 years. But that woman had just died, and the one being born in her place was not going down without a fight. Leo Vance's office smelled of strong coffee and old paper. It was a small place downtown, with shelves full of dusty law books and a wooden desk that had seen better days. But when I sat across from the 50-year-old man with premature gray hair and tired eyes, I felt for the first time in months that someone was truly listening to me. "Mrs. Garcia, let me see those papers again." Leo was Carmen's cousin, and when she told him my situation, he agreed to see me without a consultation fee. "It's the least I can do for my cousin's close friend," he'd said on the phone. He spread out the documents I had signed weeks, now seemingly years ago, putting on a pair of reading glasses that made him look more serious. For 10 eternal minutes, he read every line while I wrung my hands in my lap. "Barbara," he said finally, taking off his glasses and looking me in the eye. "This isn't a simple authorization like they told you. This is a quitclaim deed, a total transfer of property rights. I know that now, but I didn't know what I was signing." "Exactly. And that's your son's legal problem." His eyes lit up for the first time. "Look, it says you signed, but there was no notary present, no independent witnesses, and more importantly," he got up and went to a magnifying glass on his desk, "the signature here doesn't perfectly match the signatures on your official ID." My heart began to beat faster. What does that mean? It means there are enough irregularities to challenge the transfer. But that's not all. He opened a new folder and pulled out some printed papers. "I did a little digging on your son. The house was sold immediately after it was transferred to his name. That's called premeditation. It means he was already planning to sell it before he even had you sign. Premeditation. My son had planned to steal my house before he even asked me to sign those papers. So what can I do? We can file a lawsuit to nullify the transfer on the grounds of fraud and undue influence. But Barbara, I need you to understand something. This is going to be a long, expensive battle. And your son is going to hire good lawyers with the money he got from the sale. I don't have money for good lawyers." Leo smiled for the first time. "But I know someone who can help. His name is Ethan Cole. He's young, brilliant, and specializes in cases of familial fraud. He gets a kick out of taking down bullies." 3 days later, I was sitting in the office of Ethan Cole, a sharp 32-year-old man with a neat beard and eyes that seemed to see right through you. His office was modern, with green plants and a view of the Tower of the Americas that calmed me somehow. "Mrs. Garcia, I'm going to be straight with you. Your case is complex, but we have a solid foundation to win. The question is, are you willing to see this through to the end?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, if we win this case, your son could face criminal charges for fraud. He could go to prison. Are you prepared for that?" The question hit me like a bucket of cold water. For a moment, the image of Alex behind bars made me hesitate. He was still my son, despite everything. But then I remembered Sophia's pearls, Alex's gold watch, the necklace that cost more than my entire year's Social Security, the luxuries bought with my house money while I slept on a borrowed couch. "Yes," I said, in a voice I didn't recognize as my own. "I'm prepared." Ethan nodded in approval. "Perfect. I'm not going to charge you a dime until we recover your money. And when we do, my fee will be 20%. Does that sound fair?" It was more than fair. It was a miracle. And how long could this take? Best case, 6 months. Worst case, 2 years. But Mrs. Garcia, I need you to understand something. From this day forward, your son is going to try to contact you. He's going to try to convince you to drop the lawsuit. He will cry, He will make promises. He will try to manipulate you in every way possible. Ethan stood up and walked to the window. Men like your son are very predictable. First, they'll deny everything. Then, they'll try to minimize the damage. Next, they'll try to make you feel guilty. And finally, when they see nothing has worked, they will show their true colors. What are their true colors? Those of the predator he always was, the one you couldn't see because he's your son. That night, for the first time in months, I slept soundly. Not because my problems were solved, but because I finally had a plan. I was no longer a passive victim waiting for life to deal me another blow. I was a woman who had decided to fight back. Ethan's first legal move was to file a motion to freeze the assets obtained from the sale of the house. In simple terms, it meant Alex could no longer freely spend the $850,000. The court order hit his bank account on a Friday morning. Alex called me that same afternoon. I hadn't heard his voice in over a month, and when I saw his name on Carmen's caller ID, my first instinct was to ignore it. But I needed to hear what he had to say. "Mom?" His voice was different. Nervous. Almost pleading. "Yes, Alex." "Mom, I need to see you. There's been a huge misunderstanding about the house. Some lawyers came to my office and—" "There's no misunderstanding, Alex. You sold my house without telling me and kept the money." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Mom, it's not what you think. I was saving that money for you. I was going to give it to you once you were settled in at our house." Liar. He was a liar, just as he'd always been, but I had been too blind to see it. "And Sophia's pearls? And your gold watch? Were you saving those for me too?" Another silence. "Who told you about that?" "It doesn't matter who told me. What matters is that it's true." "Mom, please, we can fix this between us. We don't need lawyers. We're family." Family. How easy it was for him to use that word when it suited him. "Alex, for 35 years, we were family when you needed me. When you needed money for school, when you needed me to watch your kids, when you needed me to work double shifts so you could have a better life. But when I needed honesty, when I needed respect, when I needed you to treat me like your mother and not like an idiot, then we weren't family anymore." "Mom, no, Alex. Don't call me Mom anymore. Mothers deserve love, not betrayal. I'll see you in court." I hung up the phone, my hands shaking, but not from fear. It was pure adrenaline. It was the feeling of taking control of my life for the first time in decades. Carmen, who had heard the entire conversation from the kitchen, came over and hugged me. "I'm so proud of you, Barbara." And for the first time in months, I was proud of myself too. That night, I looked at myself in Carmen's bathroom mirror. The woman looking back was not the same one who had signed those papers months ago. She was still 61. She still had wrinkles around her eyes. She still had gray hairs that needed dyeing. But there was something different in her eyes. Something that shined with a light I hadn't seen in years. It was determination. It was strength. It was the power of a woman who had decided she would no longer let anyone walk all over her. The following Monday, Ethan called with news. "Mrs. Garcia, I have some interesting information. It turns out your son used the house as collateral for a massive loan before selling it. In other words, he didn't just sell it. He went into debt using your property. Is that good or bad for us?" "It's very good, because it proves malicious intent. He knew exactly what he was doing when he asked you to sign those papers." Malicious intent. Another legal term that described what I had known in my heart all along. My son had deliberately betrayed me. So what's next? Now we keep up the pressure. We have our first hearing in 2 weeks. That's when your son is going to understand that you are not the same woman who signed those papers. And I wasn't. The woman who signed those papers believed in unconditional love and family loyalty. The woman going to that hearing believed in justice and self-respect. And that woman had no intention of losing. The hearing was scheduled for 10 in the morning at the Bexar County Civil Courthouse. I arrived an hour early, wearing the only formal suit I owned, a navy blue one I'd bought for my husband's funeral 15 years ago. Carmen had lent me a pair of black shoes that were a little too big, but gave me a sense of dignity I hadn't felt in months. Ethan was waiting for me on the courthouse steps with a reassuring smile. "Ready for this, Mrs. Garcia?" "As ready as I'll ever be. Remember what we talked about. No matter what your son says, no matter how he tries to manipulate you stay calm and you tell the truth, nothing else. We entered the building, an old, majestic place with high ceilings and hallways that smelled of disinfectant and old paper. The sound of our footsteps echoed on the worn tiles as we walked toward the courtroom. And then I saw them. Alex was sitting on a wooden bench, dressed in an expensive suit I'd never seen, flanked by two men in even more expensive suits who were obviously his lawyers. When he saw me, his face changed. For a split second, he looked like the little boy he'd been when he got hurt and ran to me for comfort. But then I saw something else in his eyes, something cold and calculating that made me realize the boy I had raised no longer existed, if he ever truly had. Sophia sat beside him, wearing a dress that probably cost more than 3 of my Social Security checks combined. Her pearls gleamed under the fluorescent lights, like tiny taunts aimed directly at me. When we sat on the opposite side of the room, Alex stood up and walked toward us. "Mom, please, we can still fix this." Ethan put a gentle hand on my arm, a silent reminder to stay calm. "Alex, return to your seat. We'll speak through the judge in here. Mom, I'm your son. How can you do this to me? After everything we've been through together, after everything our family means." Family, that word again. "Alex," I said, my voice calmer than I felt. "Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't lie. Family doesn't abandon their elderly members on borrowed couches while they buy gold watches." His face hardened. "You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. And in a few minutes, the judge is going to know too." When our case was called, Judge Ramirez, an older man with a gray mustache and a serious expression, asked us to approach. He seemed like a man who had seen every kind of family dispute in his career, and something about the way he looked at us told me he wouldn't be easily impressed by expensive suits or crocodile tears. Ethan presented our case with a precision that filled me with pride. He explained the irregularities in the documents, the lack of a notary, the discrepancies in the signatures, the immediate sale of the property, the use of the house as collateral before the transfer. When it was Alex's lawyer's turn, they made their case with the coldness of well-paid professionals. They argued that I had signed willingly, that I was an elderly woman who could no longer care for herself, that Alex had acted in my best interest. Then came the moment I had been both dreading and awaiting, my turn to speak. "Mrs. Garcia," the judge said, "can you please explain in your own words what happened?" I stood up, my legs trembling but my voice firm. "Your Honor, I raised my son alone after his father died when he was 12. I worked double shifts for years to pay for his education. I sold everything of value I owned so he could have a better future. I took care of his children whenever he needed me. I lent him money every time he asked." My voice grew stronger with each word. "When he brought me those papers, he told me it was just an authorization to help with the house's paperwork. He told me I was going to live with them, that they would take care of me. I trusted him because he was my son, because for 35 years he had called me Mom, and I thought that meant something." I looked directly at Alex. 3 days after I signed, a moving truck showed up without warning. They took all my furniture, including the sewing machine I used to make a living. They left me without a home, without a job, without any money, sleeping on a neighbor's couch. And when I found out they had sold my house for $850,000 and spent the money on luxuries, I understood that to my son, I had never been his mother. I had been his personal bank. The courtroom was silent. "Your Honor, I don't want revenge. I just want justice. I just want back what is mine so I can live out my final years with dignity." As I sat down, tears were streaming down my cheeks, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of liberation. Then it was Alex's turn to testify. He stood with the confidence of someone who had gotten his way his whole life by using nice words and emotional manipulation. "Your Honor, my mother is not well. She's 61 and lives alone. The house was too big for her, too dangerous. I was only trying to protect her." "And the money from the sale?" the judge asked. "It's in a special savings account for her. I only bought a few necessary things for my family while we were preparing her room in our house." Liar. A liar to the very end. Ethan stood up, a folder in his hand. "Your Honor, I have here Mr. Garcia's bank statements from the last 3 months. I would like to submit them as evidence." The papers made their way to the judge, who read them with an increasingly stern expression. Mr. Garcia, according to these documents, you spent $4,000 on a watch, $3,000 on jewelry for your wife, $2,000 on clothes, and other considerable amounts on luxury goods. Were these expenses intended for your mother's well-being? Alex's face turned red. Your Honor, I needed— You needed what, Mr. Garcia? You needed a $4,000 watch while your mother was sleeping on a neighbor's couch? Your Honor, my mother is exaggerating. She chose to stay with the neighbor temporarily. And that's when the mask fell off completely. Besides, Alex continued, his voice growing more aggressive, my mother has never understood money. She's always been a simple, uneducated woman. I have the right to make decisions for her if she's not capable of making them herself. Boor, the judge raised an eyebrow. Are you suggesting your mother is mentally incompetent? Not exactly, but— Your Honor, she's an older, working-class woman. She doesn't understand investments or managing large properties. There it was. The truth that had always been simmering beneath his pretty words. To Alex, I was a simple, uneducated woman, incapable of making my own decisions. A woman who existed to serve him, and who should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention he decided to give me. Ethan was on his feet instantly. Your Honor, Mrs. Garcia managed her own finances for 61 years. She raised a son by herself, worked for decades as a self-employed seamstress, paid off a mortgage, and maintained a home. Her mental and financial capacity was never in question until it became convenient for her son to question it. The judge nodded, then did something I didn't expect. He looked directly at me. Mrs. Garcia, do you have anything else to add? I stood one last time. I was no longer shaking. I was no longer afraid. Your Honor, for 35 years, my son has seen me as someone beneath him, someone simple, someone who exists to solve his problems and fund his whims. But I am not simple. I am a woman who worked her entire life, who paid her bills, who raised her son with love and sacrifice. I am a woman who deserves respect. I looked at Alex one final time, and if he can't give me that respect as a son, then I'll demand it from the law as a citizen. 2 weeks later, Judge Ramirez delivered his verdict. The transfer of the house was declared null and void due to fraud and coercion. Alex had 30 days to return the full $850,000 plus interest and legal fees. Furthermore, a criminal investigation for fraud was opened, which could result in felony charges. When we walked out of the courthouse that day, Alex was waiting on the steps. Mom, wait. I stopped and looked at him. I no longer saw my son. I saw him for what he was, a stranger who shared my last name. What do you want, Alex? Is that it? 35 years of being your son, and it means nothing now? The question stung for a second. Just for a second. Alex, you were my son for 35 years, but I have been your mother for 61, and a mother didn't deserve what you did to me. I turned and walked toward Ethan's car. You can't do this to me, he shouted behind me. I'm your blood. I stopped and turned one last time. My blood wouldn't have stolen my house. My blood wouldn't have left me homeless. My blood wouldn't have treated me like trash. You're my mother. You'll always be my mother. No, Alex. A mother is earned with love and respect, and you lost the right to call me that the day you decided I wasn't even worth the crumbs from your table. That night, for the first time in months, we had a celebration dinner at Carmen's house. She had smoked a brisket and bought a bottle of aged tequila she saved for special occasions. To Barbara, Carmen toasted. The bravest woman I know. To justice, I toasted back. And to never again letting anyone make me feel small. The tequila tasted like freedom. The first check arrived 3 weeks after the verdict. The original $850,000, plus interest and legal fees. A total of $1,200,000. It was the first time in my life I had held so much money at once. And when the bank teller handed me the certified check, my hands shook so much I thought I would drop it. Are you all right, ma'am? The teller asked. A young man no older than 25. Looking at me with genuine concern. Yes, I said, smiling for the first time in what felt like forever. I'm perfect. But that wasn't true. I wasn't perfect. I was better than perfect. I was free. The first thing I did was pay Ethan his fee. When I handed him the check for $240,000, he looked at me with a smile that was worth more than all the money in the world. "Mrs. Garcia, it has been an honor to work with you. Ethan, you gave me back more than my money. You gave me back my dignity." After leaving his office, I walked through the streets of downtown San Antonio with a feeling I hadn't experienced in decades. I was in no hurry to get anywhere. I didn't have to answer to anyone. I didn't have to ask for permission or explain my decisions. I was a free, 61-year-old woman with nearly $1 million in the bank and all the time in the world to decide what to do with the rest of my life. My first decision was to find my own home. For 2 weeks, I toured apartments and small houses in different neighborhoods. Some real estate agents treated me with condescension when I arrived alone, assuming an older woman wouldn't have the financial means to buy a decent property. But when they saw I could pay in cash, their attitudes changed dramatically. Finally, I found what I was looking for: an apartment on the 10th floor of a modern building in the Pearl District, with a panoramic view of the city and spacious enough for one person without being too large to maintain. It had 2 bedrooms, a living room with enormous windows, a modern, fully equipped kitchen, and most importantly, a balcony where I could put as many plants as I wanted. The day I signed the deed, the title agent congratulated me. "You're a very lucky woman, Mrs. Garcia." "No," I told him. "I'm a very hard-working woman who is finally getting what she deserves." Moving into my new apartment was completely different from that horrible morning when they took my furniture from my old house. This time, I chose every single piece. I visited stores I had never been able to afford, not to buy the most expensive thing, but to buy exactly what I liked. I bought a sky blue sofa because I had always wanted one that color but had never dared. I bought a solid wood dining table for 4, even though I lived alone, because I liked the idea of having space in case I ever wanted to have friends over for dinner. I bought a king-size bed with a mattress so comfortable that for the first few nights, I woke up surprised at how well I had slept. But the most important thing I bought was a new sewing machine, not because I needed to work, but because sewing had been my passion for 40 years, and I wasn't about to give it up just because I now had money. The new Singer was a digital model with features I didn't even know existed. I spent days reading the manual and learning how to use it, feeling the same excitement as a child with a new toy. A month after I moved in, Carmen came to visit. When she walked into the apartment, she stood at the door with her mouth open. "Oh, Barbara, this is beautiful. Come on, I'll give you the tour." I showed her every corner of my new home with the pride of someone who had earned every square foot with sweat and tears. When we got to the balcony where I had placed pots of bougainvillea, geraniums, and mint, Carmen sat in one of the new chairs and sighed. "You know what I love most about all this?" "What?" "That for the first time since I've known you, I see you living for yourself, not for your son, not for your grandkids, not for anyone else, for you." She was right. For 60 years, every decision I had made was with other people in mind. What was best for my husband? What was best for Alex? What was most convenient for my family? For the first time in my life, I was making decisions based solely on what made me happy. And it turned out there were a lot of things that made me happy that I'd never had the chance to discover. Like traveling. One afternoon, while flipping through a magazine at the hair salon where I'd gotten a stylish new haircut, I saw an ad for senior travel groups. Small tours visiting destinations across the country with specialized guides and relaxed schedules. I had never in my life traveled for pleasure. The only trips I'd ever taken were to visit sick relatives or to accompany Alex to his important events. But now, I could go wherever I wanted, whenever I wanted, for as long as I wanted. My first trip was to Santa Fe, New Mexico. 5 days exploring the city, the markets, the art galleries, tasting food I had never imagined. I traveled with a group of 12 people, all over 50, all with interesting stories to tell. I met Elena, a 58-year-old retired teacher who had decided to travel across America after divorcing a husband who had made her feel invisible for 30 years. I met Roberto, a 65-year-old accountant who had lost his wife to cancer and was traveling to honor the dreams they'd had together, but had never been able to fulfill. At night, after our group dinners, we would sit in the hotel courtyard and talk, and I discovered that my story wasn't unique. There were so many people who had spent decades living for others, and at some point had decided they deserved to live for themselves. Freedom, Elena told me one night over coffee, has no age. It can come at 20 or at 80. The important thing is to recognize it when it arrives and not to waste it. When I came back from Santa Fe, something had changed in me. I hadn't just enjoyed the trip. I had discovered that I could be happy on my own, that I didn't need anyone's approval to feel whole. I decided to sign up for a watercolor painting class at the local community art center. I had always loved art, but never had the time or money to explore it. The teacher, a woman my age named Patricia, greeted me with a smile. "Have you ever painted before?" "Only walls," I said, and we both laughed. "Perfect. Then you have no bad habits to unlearn." During the first few classes, my paintings looked like a 5-year-old's. The colors bled, the shapes were distorted. Nothing looked like what I was trying to paint, but I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I was doing something just for the pleasure of it, with no pressure for the result to be perfect or useful to anyone else. After 2 months, I painted my first decent watercolor, a landscape of Santa Fe based on photos from my trip. When Patricia saw it, she smiled. "Barbara, this is beautiful. You have a natural talent." "Really? Really? But more importantly, you have passion. And that passion shows in every brushstroke." That night, I hung my first painting on my living room wall, next to a photograph of me in Santa Fe, smiling in front of a gallery. The photo shows a 61-year-old woman with a modern haircut, new clothes she chose because she liked them, and a smile that comes from the soul. That woman was me, but she was also someone entirely new. She was the woman who had been hidden for decades under the expectations of others, under the weight of family responsibilities, under the fear of disappointing people or being alone. She was the woman who had finally learned that being alone and being abandoned were two completely different things. One evening, while I was having dinner on my balcony watching the Texas sunset, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Hello? Grandma?" My heart stopped. It was Camilla's voice, my granddaughter. "Camilla, how did you get my number?" "I looked it up online. Grandma, I need to see you." For a second, all my defenses crumbled. The grandmother I had been for years wanted to say yes immediately. "Come whenever you want. All is forgiven." But the new woman who had been born these past few months was more cautious. "Why, Camilla?" "Because I miss you. Because everything is wrong at my house since Dad lost the money. Because my parents are fighting all the time, and I just want things to go back to the way they were." "Did your father ask you to call me?" There was a long pause. "Not exactly. But Grandma, he's in a really bad place. He's drinking a lot, and Mom says they're going to get a divorce and—" "Camilla," I interrupted her gently, "I love you. I will always love you. But I can't solve your parents' problems. They made their choices, and now they have to live with the consequences." "But Grandma, sweetheart, when you're older and you want to have a relationship with me based on real affection, not on solving money problems, I will be here. But until then, I need you to respect my decision to stay away from that situation." I hung up the phone with a broken heart, but with the certainty that I had done the right thing. The grandchildren who truly loved me would find a way to have a relationship with me without asking me to go back to being their parents' victim. The ones who didn't would eventually understand when they were older. That night, as I prepared for bed in my king-size bed, in my paid-for apartment, in my new life built with my own effort and dignity, I looked at myself one last time in the mirror. The woman looking back was no longer a victim. She was a survivor. She was a free woman. And she was, for the first time in 61 years, completely her own. 6 months later, while having breakfast on my balcony watching the sunrise, I received a letter I wasn't expecting. The envelope had my name written in the careful script of someone who had learned cursive in Catholic school, just like me. It was from Leo, my youngest grandson. "Dear Grandma Barbara," the letter began, "I turned 18 last week, and my parents told me the truth about what happened with you. Not the whole truth, I'm sure, but enough for me to understand that they did something very wrong to you." My hands trembled slightly as I kept reading. "I want you to know that I didn't know anything. I thought you had decided to stay away from us because you didn't love us anymore. Dad told us you had changed, that you had become bitter and that it was better not to bother you. He never told us that he had stolen your house. I put the letter down on the table for a moment to wipe away the tears that were starting to blur my vision. I got your address through a friend who works at the courthouse. I know you might not want to see me because I'm Dad's son, but I'm also your grandson. And I want to get to know the grandmother who was brave enough to stand up for herself when no one else would. I don't expect you to forgive me for not looking for you sooner. I only hope you'll give me a chance to get to know you without all the family drama in the middle. If you want to see me, I'll be at the Starbucks near the Pearl this Sunday at 4 in the afternoon. I'll wait there for 2 hours. If you don't come, I'll understand that you need more time. Love, your grandson, Leo. That Sunday at 4 o'clock sharp, I walked into the Starbucks. Leo was sitting at a corner table, but it took me a moment to recognize him. The skinny, shy boy I remembered had grown into a tall, serious young man, with his grandfather's intelligent eyes and a mature expression that didn't belong on an 18-year-old. When he saw me, he stood up immediately. Grandma. He didn't run to me like he did when he was little. He approached slowly, respectfully, as if he understood that our relationship would have to be rebuilt from scratch. Hello, Leo. We sat across from each other, and for the first few minutes neither of us knew what to say. Finally, he broke the silence. You look different. More, I don't know how to explain it. Stronger? I feel different. I want to apologize for everything. For not looking for you. For believing Dad's lies. For... Leo, I interrupted him gently. You were 17 when all this happened. You had no responsibility for the decisions adults made. But I could have called you. I could have asked more questions. I could have... Honey, could-haves don't do any good. What matters is that you're here now. We talked for 3 hours. He told me about school, his plans to study engineering, and how things had changed at home after Alex lost the money. He told me his parents barely spoke to each other, that Camilla was starting to have trouble in school, and that he had gotten a part-time job to help with expenses. Dad drinks a lot now, he said, staring at his coffee instead of at me. He says it's all your fault, that you ruined him with your lawyers. But I think he ruined himself. I didn't tell him he was right, though he was. That was a discovery he would have to make on his own. And how are you, Grandma? Are you okay? I'm better than okay, Leo. I'm at peace. When we said goodbye, he asked if he could see me again. Whenever you want, I told him. But on one condition, that it's because you want to be with me, not because you feel a family obligation or because someone asked you to come. What if I just want to come because I like talking to you? Then I would love to see you as often as you like. Since then, Leo comes to visit me every couple of weeks. He never asks for money. He never brings messages from his father. He never tries to convince me to forgive or go back. He just comes to have coffee, tell me about his life, and ask about mine. He's come to a few of my painting classes. He's gone with me to see exhibits at the art museum. We even went to Florida together on one of my group trips. It is, for the first time in my life, a family relationship based on genuine affection and not on obligation or need. 2 weeks ago, while I was painting on my balcony, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, I found Camilla. She was 17 now and looked exactly as I had at her age. Scared, lost, but trying to look strong. Hi, Grandma. Hello, Camilla. Can I come in? I poured her some iced tea and we sat in my living room. For several minutes, she just looked around, at my plants, my paintings, my new home. You look happy, she said finally. I am. Leo says you've changed a lot, that you're not the same grandma you used to be. No, I'm not. Do you hate us? Leo and me? The question broke my heart. Camilla, I could never hate you. You are my grandchildren, but I will no longer allow myself to be used or manipulated, no matter who is doing it. Not even if it's me, not even if it's you. She nodded as if she had expected that answer. Dad says that if you come back and drop the lawsuit, everything can go back to how it was. Camilla, there's no lawsuit to drop. That case is closed. And no, nothing can ever go back to how it was. Because I am not the same person I was. But could you forgive us? Someday? There's nothing to forgive on your part. You were a child when all this happened. As for your father, I paused, choosing my words carefully. He knows where to find me if he ever wants to truly apologize. But Camilla, that forgiveness would not include me going back to being the person I was before. Camilla left that afternoon without any promises from me, but also without any demands. She understood, I think, that relationships have to be earned with actions, not with pretty words or emotional blackmail. Last night, having dinner on my favorite balcony, I reflected on everything that had changed in my life over these 8 months. I was no longer the woman who signed papers without reading them out of blind trust. I was no longer the woman who worked double shifts to fund someone else's whims. I was no longer the woman who settled for the emotional crumbs others decided to give her. I was a woman who had learned that self-love isn't selfishness, it's survival, who had discovered that being alone can be liberating instead of terrifying, who had understood that respect is demanded, not begged for. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Elena, my travel friend, inviting me to join her on a trip to Savannah, Georgia next month. There's this incredible place, full of history. They say it's magical. I'd love to go. Perfect. You know what I love most about traveling with you, Barbara? What? You're a woman who knows how to enjoy her freedom without asking anyone for permission. After I hung up, I thought about her words. Elena was right. I had learned to enjoy my freedom without asking anyone for permission. Not my son, not my grandchildren, not the society that expects women my age to settle for being invisible and grateful. This morning, as I wrote in the journal I started after I moved, I realized something important. For the first time in my life, when I think about the future, I don't see obligations or sacrifices. I see possibilities. I see trips to places I have yet to visit. I see paintings I have yet to create. I see books I have yet to read. I see relationships I have yet to build. I see a 61-year-old woman who finally understood that life doesn't end when your children leave or when betrayals happen. Life is renewed when you decide you deserve better. Yesterday, while walking downtown, I passed a woman my age walking with her head down, carrying heavy grocery bags that were clearly hurting her hands. Something in her posture reminded me of the woman I had been 8 months ago. Tired, resigned, invisible. I approached her. "Excuse me, ma'am. Do you need a hand?" She looked at me, surprised, as if she weren't used to strangers caring about her. "No, thank you. I'm almost home." "Are you sure? Those bags look very heavy." For a moment, I saw tears in her eyes. "Actually," she said, "it's been years since anyone has asked me if I needed help." I helped her carry her bags to her house. Along the way, she told me she'd lived alone since her husband passed, that her only daughter had moved out of state, and that sometimes weeks went by without anyone speaking a word to her. When we reached her door, I gave her my phone number. "In case you ever want to get coffee and talk." "Really?" "Really. All women our age deserve to have friends who understand." A week later, we went to the farmer's market at the Pearl together. The next week, I invited her to my painting class. Next month, she's coming with me and Elena to Savannah. Her name is Rosa, and she's discovering, at 65, that it's never too late for new friends and new adventures. Because that's the most important lesson I've learned in these months. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how much time you've lost being the person others wanted you to be. It is always possible to be reborn. It is always possible to start over. It is always possible to demand the respect you deserve. It's not selfishness. It's survival. It's not revenge. It's justice. It's not loneliness. It's freedom. And if you're listening to this story and something resonates with you, if you recognize in my words your own life or that of a woman you know, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever been in a situation like mine? Or do you know someone who has? If the answer is yes, I want you to know that you are not alone, that it's not too late to change, that you deserve respect, true love, and freedom. Comment your answer below. And if this story touched your heart, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel so this message can reach someone else who needs to hear it. Because all women, regardless of their age, deserve a second chance to be happy.